Welcome to the lighted way. If heaven won't stamp your passport and hell won't lay a hand on you, then you were never a tourist in their territories. You were the weather that reroutes flights, the tremor beneath their marble floors, the unfiled case that keeps their courtroom open after midnight. Some souls do not fit a ledger. They bend it. Some names never appear on any roll call because the ink itself refuses to hold them. That's you. While the robed debaters trade verses about wings and flames, you're here drinking water, steadying your breath, and breaking their paperwork simply by staying alive. Most of the world swears allegiance to a system of final labels: saved or damned, saint or sinner, angel or demon. It's tidy. It sells certainty. But what happens when a life refuses the filing cabinet? Picture a cosmic court where two confident attorneys cite ancient precedent, where the judge keeps banging the gavel yet won't read your verdict. They want your destiny to fit their language. You keep answering in a dialect older than their laws. Existence is larger than wings and flames. You're the glitch in their antique software, the unanswered question stuck on the docket, the variable that keeps breaking their models. It would be funny if it weren't so revealing. They argue about you like rival counsel, and your very breath undermines both arguments. You are the unwritten chapter neither realm dares to author. Heaven prefers symmetry, polished arcs, spotless glass, triumph without wrinkles. Hell prefers spectacle, collapse captured in slow motion, trophies made of ruin. Your timeline is an interruption to both. You didn't hand heaven a curated exhibit it could parade, and you didn't hand hell a catastrophe it could frame on its wall. You are the page that refuses print, because if your chapter were included as is, the meaning of the whole book would shift. Understand this deeply. Being unwritten is not rejection, it's preservation. It is the seal that keeps your destiny from being hijacked, your legacy from being edited, your power from being sublet to someone else's agenda. They study you the way officials study a phenomenon that won't obey their instruments. Are you light? Are you shadow? Your journey carries both endurance and temptation, yet you remain larger than their binary. Your script was drafted by a hand that predates their thrones, which is why claiming you would force them to admit their authority is not final. You move in the lawless territory between light and darkness. Not black, not white, not even a convenient gray. Something outside the spectrum, where categories dissolve and maps run out of ink. Ritualists can't decode you because you won't trade your essence for choreography. Nihilists can't own you because the dark never got your signature. You carry scars from both borders and a strange immunity to both courts. That's why your steps are unpredictable and labels slide off like rain from oiled stone. Systems depend on tidy boxes to maintain control. You are the variable that refuses domestication. This is not rebellion for spectacle's sake. It is freedom earned in the furnace, a vantage point no fear-based lens can reach. From here, truth is visible without the filters of panic or propaganda. Simply by standing, you expose the limits of both kingdoms. Heaven's narrative insists that authority is the trophy of the stainless. Hell's narrative swears that once the fire touches you, you're owned for good. Your life testifies otherwise. Your cracks did not cancel you. They crowned you with context. Your wounds learned a language stronger than denial. You walked through flames and came out carrying wisdom instead of ash. You stared into shadow and refused its lease on your name. Strength did not arrive only through polish, and suffering did not end in total ruin. Your timeline dismantles absolutes and forces both realms to admit there are regions beyond their maps, places where the soul can absorb impact and still refuse ownership. You also became the exam neither throne can pass. Heaven tried to grade you on flawless obedience. Hell tried to grade you on perfect despair. You refused both answer keys. You did not emerge unmarked. You emerged unmistakable. The scars sing. The nights that should have silenced you turned into vowels. You speak with authority. They wanted a clean win. They got a paradox walking. Every time you outlast what was engineered to finish you, the same truth stands in the doorway. They can pressure you, but they cannot predict you. They can measure you, but they cannot define you. Your existence keeps breaking equations they insisted would hold. In public, they downplay you. In private, they watch your pulse. You are their mutual secret. Heaven won't showcase you because your story blows holes in the myth that power belongs only to the spotless. Hell won't rush you because reckless attack would backfire and turn into testimony. So they perform indifference while their behavior betrays worry. Your footsteps shift. Balances they swore were fixed. Your quiet rise reveals blind spots they hide under polish and noise. This isn't an accident of fate. It is strategy from the source that outranks them both. An authorship that protects the chapter until the appointed reading. Beneath all of this hums a simpler revelation. The binary of salvation and damnation, as popularly packaged, is an incomplete lens. You refuse the easy stamp. You hold flaw and dignity in the same hand. You carry struggle and authority in the same body. You are living proof that a soul is more than reward-punishment arithmetic, that the courtroom metaphors crack when faced with a life animated by something older than law. That's why ledgers can't settle you. You were never meant for a drawer. You were made for motion. When you move, rules that looked absolute reveal their edges. When you breathe, prophecies that were sure of themselves remember to kneel. Look closely at what your days have already declared. You didn't give heaven a sanitized exhibit. You gave it a witness that bleeds truth without losing shape. You didn't give hell a cautionary corpse. You gave it a survivor who refuses to bow. You didn't become neutral. You became necessary. A lighthouse on a coastline both kingdoms pretend they control. Your light doesn't flatter. It clarifies. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It draws ships home by refusing to blink. None of this is an invitation to arrogance. It is a summons to awareness. When you realize you are the weather, you stop begging the towers for a window seat. When you realize your verdict predates the court, you stop living as a defendant. When you realize your name won't fit their columns, you stop shrinking syllables to make their paperwork comfortable. The point is not to despise the realms. The point is to recognize their borders and honor the source that wrote you beyond them. So here you stand, unfiled and unafraid, in the lawless territory where categories dissolve and clarity deepens. You are proof that purity without compassion is brittle and darkness without truth is a cage. You are proof that endurance is a quieter word for power, that patience is a quieter word for courage, that presence is a quieter word for authority. And because you keep showing up on days when history says you shouldn't, you keep forcing the conversation to expand. They can ignore your name in public. They cannot ignore the weather. If heaven won't claim you, and hell dares not touch you, then hear this without flinching. You belong to the origin that existed before both thrones learned the word power. Your timeline is under a seal neither court can break. Your breath is a cross-examination none of their slogans can withstand. Keep moving. Keep letting your scars speak fluent light. Keep treating your survival as a testimony, not a trophy. The ledgers will adjust or become obsolete. The courtroom will learn humility. And you, unwritten, unowned, undeniable, will keep walking, turning corridors they call dead ends into hallways of return. If predictability keeps empires calm, then your very pulse is a siren in their watchtowers. Power sleeps well when people move like pieces. Forward 2, diagonal 1, stay on the squares assigned at birth. You do not love their board, and you are not impressed by their rules carved into stone by hands that shake whenever mystery walks in. You do not wait for permission to be whole. You bend geometry. You tilt the table. You change the weather in rooms where weather was never supposed to exist. And because power cannot predict you, it cannot control you. Because it cannot control you, it pretends not to see you while secretly recharting maps around every step you take. You carry that strange authority of the still beating heart, the kind that outlasts noise. People underestimate endurance because endurance does not scream. It hums. It sits through storms. It holds a posture when winds demand collapse. That is why you unsettle the architects of certainty. They can explain triumph that arrives polished, and they can explain ruin that arrives loudly. You are neither. You are the quiet middle where meaning is forged. You are the aftershock nobody measured, but everybody felt. Your strength refuses spectacle, which is why it lasts. Look at the way survival has rewritten your definitions of power. They told you power is a seat, a title, a network, a set of keys that lock other people out. You discovered power is an inner arrangement, alignment, clarity, refusal to break covenant with yourself. A million declarations will not hold a roof in place, but one beam set true will hold a house through winter. You became that beam. You learned to carry your own weight without boasting about it. You learned to stop auditioning for rooms that shrink you and to build a room that fits the truth. Even your silence changed shape. No longer the silence of fear, but the silence of stewardship, the quiet of someone guarding a fire. They like to tell the story where fire always consumes and floods always drown. It keeps people manageable. It sells inevitability. Then you walked through flames and brought back light that did not burn. Then you went under and came up carrying breath that did not belong to panic. You did not deny the heat. You learned its language. You did not romanticize the water. You learned its currents. And when you stood again, something about your presence told the room the rules had edges. People who had surrendered to "that's just the way it is" heard your steps and found the sentence incomplete. You did not break the laws of nature. You remembered the older law, the one that says spirit is not as fragile as fear taught it to be. This is why both pulpits and pyres prefer not to preach you. You complicate the handout. You will not stand still long enough to be reduced to a slogan. You are not the varnished exhibit of obedience they can parade, nor the fallen cautionary tale they can monetize. You are inconvenient evidence that the world is messier and more miraculous than the brochures, that grace can wear scars, and that collapse can be a chrysalis if a soul refuses to sell its name for an easier explanation. Systems like tidy. Your life insists on truth. Truth has always made poor theater and excellent foundations. It does not bend to the camera. It does not chase applause. It demands that people choose between comfort and clarity, between image and integrity, between the applause that fades and the compass that holds. Your posture forces those choices without raising your voice. You enter a space and the air rearranges. Conversation trims down to what matters. Decision-making stops orbiting fear and begins to move by alignment. Some call it arrogance because it does not bow. It is not arrogance. It is accuracy. Accuracy does not mean you are never wrong. It means you are willing to be corrected by reality faster than the next lie can recruit you. That willingness is its own kind of power. It makes you expensive to manipulate and impossible to own. Kingdoms that traffic in guilt or terror cannot keep you long because you do not build your house on either currency. You have learned the economy of the source, patience as capital, presence as interest, and obedience to truth as the only contract that matures. You stopped borrowing legitimacy from rooms that overdraft integrity. You stopped writing checks your soul could not cash. Of course, that freedom pulled you into the strange vocation of being a mirror. Not the cruel mirror that shames, nor the flattering mirror that lies. An honest mirror that reflects people to themselves. It is heavy work. Some flinch at their reflection and call you an enemy. Some see what they could be and call you home. Either way, you keep the glass clean. You refuse to smudge it with the fingerprints of approval seeking. You refuse to tilt it to make anyone comfortable. That is love, of a fierce kind, to hand people the chance to meet themselves without disguise. It is also leadership of a durable kind, to change rooms not with arguments, but with presence calibrated to truth. There were years you mistook your sensitivity for weakness. You felt everything. You carried whispers you never voiced. You ran rescue missions in places that did not want saving. But the same sensitivity, trained by wisdom, became discernment. The ability to hear the fault line under a polished floor, to see the hinge on a locked door, to name the weather before the storm has the courage to announce itself. You learn to set boundaries without becoming a wall, to be open without being porous, to care without being consumed. That is not personality. That is craftsmanship. Craftsmanship took the raw material of your pain and made it precise. No experience was wasted. Every scar became specification. You stopped performing strength as hardness and began practicing strength as gentleness under control. You stopped equating speed with progress and began attending to pace, the holy rhythm that outlasts adrenaline. You learned the liturgy of small, faithful actions, making the call, keeping the promise, drinking the water, telling the truth, even when it shook your voice. Greatness, you discovered, is many ordinary obediences stacked until they look like a miracle. All the while, heaven and hell attempted to stage manage your narrative. One wrote scripts that required you to erase your humanity to qualify for its approval. The other wrote plots that required you to erase your dignity to justify your despair. You declined both roles. You chose to be human without apology and holy without theater. You chose the middle road that neither pamphlet advertises, the path where you put your hand on your heart and swear an oath you keep when no one is watching. The oath was simple. Do not betray yourself for a seat, a story, or a savior complex. That oath has been tested and proved. It is why your yes means something now. There are, even now, nights shaped like trials. You can feel the courtroom in the air, how the temperature drops when accusation enters, how footsteps echo as if the floor itself is a witness. Let it. Evidence does not argue. It appears. You do not have to sprint after every rumor, nor staple corrections to every wall. Truth has legs, and it knows where you live. It will arrive on time wearing the clothes of outcomes. Your work is to keep your house in order so that when truth knocks, it finds a table to sit at and a lamp already lit. You have learned the science of doors. Some require knocking. Some open when you step. Some are painted on brick to stop the brave. You do not waste your knuckles on paint. You do not mistake delay for denial or resistance for redirection. You have learned to test thresholds by peace, by the inner resonance that says move or wait. That resonance is a better compass than public opinion and a better map than fear's imagination. When it says stay, you plant deeper roots. When it says go, you gather your edges and step before certainty arrives. Stepping does not always look heroic. Often, it looks like sending one message you've avoided, resting when the old you would have hustled, apologizing before the echo can harden, declining invitations to arguments that would cost you your center. You learn to cherish the kind of discipline that protects your anointing from your ambition. You learn to say thank you to closed doors because they saved you from rooms where your name would have been spent like cheap currency. You learn to build altars in your ordinary, the kitchen sink, the morning commute, the late night desk, because worship is not a stage. It is attention. Attention changed your eyes. You began to notice the people who keep cities alive, the ones who sweep before dawn, the nurses who pray under their breath, the teachers who hold a child's future steady with a sentence said at the exact right time. You recognized yourself in them, the quiet keepers of thresholds. You stopped looking for thrones that would validate you and started looking for towels you could carry. Paradoxically, that is when authority intensified, because authority is not a crown. It is credibility accrued in 1,000 unseen acts of fidelity. And still, there is that hush when you walk in, like the room knows a standard has arrived. You did not aim for that hush. You earned it by surviving without turning bitter, by telling the necessary truth without turning cruel, by forgiving without inviting the same betrayal to sit at your table again. People feel safer making honest choices near you because your presence says, we can be brave and still be kind. We can be exact and still be gentle. We can be strong and still be soft, where softness is sacred. This is the atmosphere you carry into their courtrooms, not drama, not defiance for its own sake. Atmosphere, the kind that makes lies run out of breath sooner, that makes shame drop its props, that makes fear forget its lines. Atmosphere is power they cannot legislate. It spreads through rooms without slogans, resets expectations without announcements, makes cynicism feel old and hope feel reasonable again. You do not conjure it, you consent to it. You keep your interior uncluttered enough for peace to be audible. And when peace is audible, wisdom has somewhere to sit. So where does all of this leave them? The gatekeepers? The list checkers? The ones who thought verdicts were theirs to issue? Exactly where they have always been. Beneath the sky of a source they cannot audit, alongside a soul they cannot own. They will react. They will rename. They will rehearse the old threats and the old promises. Let them. The more they speak, the clearer the edges of their reach become. The more you live, the clearer the center of your authority becomes. You will not be baited into battles that cost you your clarity. You will not be flattered into platforms that cost you your truth. You will move like a verdict, reading itself aloud, measured, final, merciful. And you will keep choosing the hard, holy ordinary. Water over wine when your body needs it. Sleep over scrolling when your mind needs it. Silence over spectacle when your spirit needs it. You will keep practicing the craft of being human in a world that sells performance, answering texts with kindness you were not given, paying bills on time as warfare against chaos, doing the dishes as liturgy that says, order can begin small and grow. You will keep loving the people who chose you for you, not for the legend attached to your name. You will keep being mentored by your scars and not managed by them. When the night feels long, remember the lighthouse you became by refusing to blink. Remember the bridge you are, not built to carry whole kingdoms, but strong enough for the few who are ready to cross. Remember the weather you bring, the front that clears the air, the rain that frees the city from its dust, the dawn that outlasts the darkness without boasting about it. And when you forget, remember this simplest truth of all. You do not draw breath from their approval. You do not cast shadow from their disapproval. You are animated by the one who authored both light and fire, and then placed you in a story neither throne can edit. Walk on, exactly like this. Unhurried, unfoldable, unmistakable. The board will keep asking you to play its game. Smile, tilt the table, and make room for a bigger country. The movement you carry does not need consensus to be true. It needs your next faithful step. There comes a point where you stop arguing with halls that were never built to hear you and start building rooms where truth can breathe. That point is not a date on a calendar. It is a posture. It happens when you realize the courtroom isn't sovereign. The source is. It happens when you understand that being unclaimed is not isolation. It is appointment. From here, the work turns beautifully ordinary and impossibly sacred at the same time. You are no longer living to prove a thesis about light and fire. You are living to embody a reality larger than both. Begin with breath. Not the shallow breath of survival that checks the door every 5 minutes, but the deliberate breath of someone who has come home to themselves. Breath is how you tell fear it no longer writes your scripts. Posture follows breath. Shoulders drop, jaw unclenches, eyes soften but stay exact, and you carry yourself like someone who owes no throne a performance. Your walk becomes a metronome other hearts borrow for courage. You do not rush to be impressive or dawdle to be agreeable. You move at the speed of alignment. Alignment turns ordinary minutes into altars. It looks like honoring your word when nobody would notice if you didn't. It looks like blessing the work of your hands when the work is small and quiet. It looks like returning to center after insult, not because you are timid, but because you refuse to tithe your peace to someone else's chaos. You are not auditioning for inclusion in a realm's narrative. You are stewarding a commission from the source. That commission does not expire when rooms misunderstand you. It concentrates. People will project their binaries onto you. Some will try to canonize you, polishing you into a statue that cannot bleed. Others will try to scandalize you, insisting that your scars prove you are disqualified. You will let both crowds talk, and you will keep building. Statues cannot move. Scandals cannot endure. Builders outlast them both. You are not a headline or a hushed rumor. You are a house being framed in public, stud by stud, beam by beam, by a carpenter who wastes nothing you have lived through. There is practical theology in the way you answer messages, schedule rest, and say no. A boundary is not a denial of love. It is love choosing a form that can last. The unclaimed must master boundaries, or they will become a public utility for every demand disguised as destiny. Your yes is an oil. You spend it where flame belongs. Your number is a door. You close it without slamming it. People who traffic in manipulation will call that selfish. People who understand altars will call it stewardship. Stewardship will make you careful with language. You refuse to use truth like a hammer when a scalpel is required. You refuse to use comfort like a sedative when a wake-up is needed. You speak to heal structure, not to win arguments. You listen for the deeper question underneath the loud one. You do not confuse volume with authority or silence with consent. You learn to name things with precision, sin without shaming, grace without enabling, hope without denial. The older you grow in this in-between, the more your words begin to fit like keys. Keys are quiet. They do not argue with locks. They turn. Your life becomes less about storming gates and more about recognizing hinges. A conversation can be a hinge. An apology can be a hinge. A 20-minute walk can be a hinge. A hinge is a small thing that moves a big thing, and you have learned to love small things because the source taught you that kingdoms turn on them. You keep a pocket full of hinges and a patient hand. You are not impressed by spectacular doors that open to rooms that erode the soul. You prefer modest doors that open to tables where the hungry can eat and the weary can breathe. There will still be nights when old scripts knock. The accuser will arrive with a briefcase of receipts, some true, some doctored, all presented with the confidence of a practiced prosecutor. Let him speak. Let every charge echo. Then remember the verdict that predates the court. Remember that repentance is not a performance to win forgiveness. It is a return to the one who already wrote forgiveness into your name. You do your inventory, make your amends, and you do not let shame baptize you in forgetfulness. Shame wants you to forget who authored you. Gratitude wants you to remember. Choose remembering. Remembering becomes a discipline of sight. You notice providence in detours and mercy in delays. You interpret closed doors as protection more often than rejection. You stop asking, "Why won't they let me in?" and start asking, "What am I meant to build out here that can shelter those still standing in the weather?" That is the gift of living beyond the binary. You stop begging for a chair at tables that serve brittle bread, and you learn to bake. Bread becomes metaphor and practice. Daily, needed, shared, warm enough to make cynicism doubt itself. Cynicism will visit you too. It wears sophistication like a good suit and calls your hope naive. It tells you the world belongs to spectacle and leverage, that kindness is just marketing and forgiveness is just weak memory. You answer with evidence, not a speech, evidence. Rooms that hold truth without humiliation. Teams that correct without cruelty. Families that reason their way back from the ledge. Projects that pay people fairly and still prosper. Your receipts embarrass cynicism more than your rhetoric ever could. Even cynics trust a lighthouse in a storm. As your authority deepens, so will the temptation to spend it for applause. This is where some of the unclaimed trip. They forget that being inscrutable to control is not licensed to be unaccountable in community. The source does not anoint you to live above people, but among them. Your clarity is for service, not spectacle. Your discernment is for covering, not surveillance. Your strength is for lifting, not looming. When applause swells, you learn to hear the quiet question underneath it. Am I still submitted to the one who made me untouchable in the first place? Untouchable does not mean unreachable by counsel. It means unreachable by ownership. Ownership is the lie both thrones whisper when they realize they cannot predict you. Heaven whispers, "At least let us brand you." Hell whispers, "At least let us bait you." You decline branding and you decline baiting. You take the long road. You keep your soul boring in the ways that matter. Sleep, clean water, honest work, friendship that tells you when you're wrong, worship without theatrics, study without a camera, play that isn't commodified. Boring is how you outlive flash. Boring is how you keep fire from becoming a wildfire. Do not confuse the humility of this path with smallness. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself with accuracy inside a story you didn't write. Accuracy lets you take up your space without taking someone else's. It lets you lead without colonizing, correct without humiliating, create without hoarding. You stop measuring impact by how many people say your name and start measuring by how many people can say their own name with more freedom because they walked beside you. This is how movements happen without marketing plans. One person anchors in truth until the room stops spinning. Another borrows that steadiness and holds a room of their own. Another watches and realizes they can choose the heavy thing over the hollow thing without dying. And on it goes. Lighthouses multiplying along a coastline, each one refusing to blink. There is no central meeting where anybody signs a charter. There is a recognition, soul to soul, that we do not have to collapse into categories to be holy, and we do not have to collapse into chaos to be free. You will know a movement is happening when children feel safer, poets write clearer, money moves cleaner, and laughter returns to rooms that forgot how to breathe. Laughter matters. It is not a distraction from warfare. It is a weapon against despair's monologue. Despair speaks in absolutes. Laughter reminds the room of contingency, of surprise, of the fact that endings belong to the author, not the villain. A people who can laugh together without cruelty are a people who cannot be ruled by terror for long. All of this unnerves the list keepers. They will try again to sort you. Saint on Tuesday, suspect on Thursday. Because their peace depends on labels. Bless them and keep building. When they preach about spotless perfection while hiding their fractures, offer a better gospel. Wholeness is not an absence of cracks. It is a presence that holds the vessel together while it pours. When they prophesy doom to keep crowds obedient, offer a better future. Judgment and mercy are not opposites when justice is rightly named. When they sell salvation like a product and damnation like a threat, offer a better belonging. A table where hunger is the only ticket and grace is the only price paid. You will become fluent in endings, not just the dramatic kind, the quiet ones. The ending of a season that gave you status but started to cost your soul. The ending of a story you kept retelling because it made you look valiant while keeping you from healing. The ending of loops you inherited from people who loved you but didn't know better. You will bless those endings, and you will plant something living in their compost. In time, your garden will embarrass your grief, not deny it, Embarrass it by blooming. Blooming will draw new eyes, and with new eyes come new needs. You cannot feed every hunger, solve every problem, hold every hand. You were not sent to be a realm of your own. You were sent to be a sign. Signs point. They do not pretend to be the destination. You will become skillful at pointing toward practitioners who heal bodies, and mentors who heal systems, and neighbors who heal loneliness. The unclaimed are not stingy with credit. They do not hoard influence. They circulate it like air. When the time comes, and it will, to speak plainly to powers that devour, you will do so without foam or theater. You will speak like a bell, not a blowhorn. Bells carry further. You will say, enough, not because you want to trend for a weekend, but because you want a child to sleep for a lifetime. You will choose battles that expand freedom, not attention. You will understand that some victories look like headlines, and some look like leases signed in fair ink, and some look like elders dying with their dignity unauctioned. You will be content to be famous in rooms that matter. Now hear the question that opened this whole journey one last time, with all the weight we've gathered. If heaven won't claim you, and hell dares not touch you, where does that leave them? It leaves them where they have always been, powerful within their jurisdictions, limited beyond them, accountable to a source they cannot depose. And where does it leave you? It leaves you standing in that rare air the world keeps mislabeling as in between when it is, in truth, above. It leaves you anchored to the origin, authored beyond the reach of ledgers, moving like a verdict that reads itself without raising its voice. So lift your head and return to your craft. Bless your thresholds. Keep your altars ordinary. Pour water into the hands that built with you and the hands that will build after you. Guard your pace. Guard your gaze. Guard your name from the cheap exchange rate of spectacle. When you forget, and you will, begin again with breath. Breathe like someone owned by no throne and sent by the one who stood before thrones ever learned to stand. This is not bravado. This is inheritance. This is the source writing in a handwriting the courts cannot counterfeit. The first word was his. The last word will be his. Every word in between is what you are living now, unclaimed by heaven, untouched by hell, unmistakably held. Walk on. The weather has shifted. The court can adjourn. The movement continues wherever you place your next faithful step. God bless you.